None of this is good, Vector. That's why it's called Sonic Forces! Alright. How's everyone doing? Is this thing on? Hello? If there ever was an example of a Sonic game doing things wrong, you'd aim your sights at this. But is it really as bad as it seems? Today I'll be explaining my first impressions on this 2017 title, and I want to hear yours in the comments too, so let's chat below. Okay, so full disclosure, I have technically played a bit of this game before. Got to Metal Sonic apparently, but I remembered nothing. Not even why I was fighting the greatest character ever. Wait! I defect! So I deleted the save and started over fresh. It took me 3.5 hours to complete the main campaign, plus some extra missions. I'm playing on an Xbox Series X, and I encountered no game-breaking bugs. Forces has been out for years, so I'll keep my explanations brief, and my opinions long. Also, spoilers ahead. So I'm gonna follow a similar approach like I did with 06. I'm not gonna tear this thing apart for a joke. It's been done, I'm too late to the party anyways, so criticisms are just gonna be honest and bare, with maybe a touch of spice. If you wanted me to freak out and get angry, I'm sorry. But good news, I was disappointed. For a topic sentence, I'd say this is a Sonic game that was polished up in all the wrong areas. The graphics are stunning, but the design is stale, the story is intriguing, but the tone is mismatched, and the gameplay simply feels too safe. It is devoid of that endearing Sonic Team risk, as the core of the game was divided into 3 comparable playstyles, rather than directed towards one unique concept. And we'll just start there. Gameplay. So, you play as 3 different characters in Sonic Forces: Sonic, Classic Sonic, and Mr. Forces. We'll just call him Avatar. That's you. Sometimes you hold hands with Sonic, but that's only when the story calls for it. Sonic himself attempts to fit into the boost formula, but a lot of the fun frenzy of his speed feels neutered. I know the game is technically faster than ever, but things feel far too wide, simple, and straightforward. These dashpad lines you encounter on every runway are like the perfect example of my grievances here. There is no challenge in aiming Sonic in 3D, no complexity. In air, sure, but on land, if you move forward, you're almost always guaranteed to be set on the correct path, which makes the gameplay feel automated, and I'm definitely not the first person to say that. Your main difficulty comes from the 2D, and even here, I wasn't experiencing anything I couldn't get elsewhere, nor much challenge on top of that. So Sonic himself was, for the most part, inoffensive. Classic Sonic, though, wasn't too bad for me. I enjoyed a lot of his levels, first and last in particular. It's not revolutionary, mind you, but his movement didn't irk me in any way. It's just Sonic being classic. But again, that's the problem, isn't it? It doesn't do anything to spice things up, it's just another level to be played. The sojourns into Genesis Land started to feel like time wasters to pad out the game length. I enjoy his experience separately on the level select, but during the campaign I just wondered, why is he here? I understand the tie-in with Mania, but Classic Sonic is not load-bearing. Removing him from Forces wouldn't change much. He just didn't seem necessary for the Resistance. Avatar, however, is the one thing Forces can call its own. You play likewise to Sonic, however you lose your boost and pick up a gun. This thing changes depending on which alien you stuff into it, but the gunplay here didn't really win me over. Playing with it made things feel too easy, so I stuck to the hook for most of the time. And let's talk about that, because it is heavily featured in set pieces and cutscenes, but never really utilized in the main game. This was the biggest misstep of Forces in my book. I felt like that hook could have been the hook of the game. Imagine if it operated on momentum, where platforming and speed was earned through the thrust of your swings. The acceleration could get faster from time held, or the length it was deployed. Long gaps could be traversed fast if you successfully swung from some risky locations, avoiding punishment paths below. And think of the attack implications too. A grab and pull to create openings in groups, certain swing speeds allowing you to plow through robots, you know, like Spider-Man. Everyone likes Spider-Man? But now I'm just being an ideas guy. As it stands, you auto-hook onto most points, and the rest of the swings snap to their position. It's disappointing because I truly believe the Avatar could have been the crux of Forces if they really focused in on it. And this crux surpasses just the gameplay, as I think he could have aided with the story as well. Let's get into that now. So first off, I appreciate what they're attempting here. Later learning that this was the jumping off point for the IDW comics put it all in perspective for me. It's kind of like a reboot in the loosest sense. Not that it erases the actions of the past, they have no problem shoving that in your face, but it creates a new standard for the world of Sonic going forward. Sonic is no longer a tourist on Earth. Or Earth's islands, you know what I mean. He's from a society of analogous creatures that live in their own communities. A lot of the classic iconography starts to look more grounded when we see that green hill checkerboard expanded and stamped into the landscape. A multicolored city that shines just as bright as the denizens of Sunset Heights, which is not the name of the city. It's just called City. Anyways, Forces is a narrative of war. Kinda intense for the blue blur, but he's survived far more apocalyptic scenarios in the past. So why doesn't this one land? My answer is the tone. It yet again feels far too safe. Sonic 06 has a very grim story for a bunch of talking animals, but it's persevered for all these years because the characters took it seriously. They believed in the stakes at hand, and the gravity of the situation translated well to the players. But here, Sonic is joking around way too much for the silence that accompanies these black and white title cards. It's just unbalanced. Many characters speak the tragedy, you just don't feel it like you did in 06. The actual tale being told here is one of resistance. Sonic and his friends have lost, and now must take back the planet. Again, great setup, but the actual reclamation lacks a lot of intriguing strategy. There are diversions and power sources being shut down, but there's always a backup, some way to keep the plot trotting along. The stakes drop the more you hit the rug pulls, and you kinda predict the ending before it comes. The range of big bads on the cover lose their luster when we learn that Infinite can just make a bajillion of them. It starts to feel a bit degrading to all these final bosses from the franchise. As it stands, it's a gloves-on approach to something that, again, could have been a bizarre but endearing risk. Come on, blow up Vector's legs or something. Make that Knuckles line sink deep. And finally, and this is probably my biggest leap, I don't think this game should have been about Sonic at all. It should have been about you! Hey, let's actually talk about you right now! Look, it's you! You didn't tell me you were in this game. No fair. The hook of Forces is that you get to make your own OC and save the day. On its face, it's a compelling idea. How does the everyman fare in a world of Sonic heroes? Turns out, extremely well! You're immediately inducted into their inner circle, pull off insane maneuvers, and basically become Sonic's best friend. And that's the underlying issue with you. You should have sucked more. No offense. With the introduction of a new Sonic society, a heavy reliance on a general Sonic populace, this felt like the perfect opportunity to tell a story about someone around Sonic. Just a standard citizen, with no superpowers, joining the fight because it's the right thing to do. You could have risen through the ranks, passed by the heroes occasionally, and finally earned their eye after a bit of hard work near the end. And I know, that all technically happens in the game. It just doesn't feel believable. It doesn't feel earned, you know? Keep us more grounded. Have the power of friendship come from your brothers in arms, not the main characters. Show the audience how some kid from Sunset Heights is just as important as that skinny blue rat. Again, they are attempting this, but still, you're sandwiched between two super blue hedgehogs. I think without them, Avatar would have been kilobytes floating around in null space. Now, making the next 3D Sonic title after years of waiting not to be about Sonic wouldn't be the wisest decision. But it would have been a hell of a risk, and I think we all would have appreciated it. And more importantly, remembered it. Plus, in my opinion, this could have been paralleled perfectly with the new big bad of this game. So now let's talk about your boyfriend, Infinite. Congratulations, you two. No wedding invite? What's up with that? I'll only charge the pulpit once, I promise. So, this guy sucks major ass, which means I love him uncontrollably. Alright, for a dash of spice, Infinite is beyond parody. He's an 8-year-old's idea of a bad guy. All-powerful, theatrical, masked up, scarred down, superpowers. They stole him from me and they stole him from you because we all invented this guy in our head when we wanted to fight Sonic. Infinite's problem is that he has no compelling motivations and lacks any real depth. All of his backstory is shoved to side content, like the comics and the DLC. From episode Shadow, which is really good, check that one out, you learn Infinite is like this because he got embarrassed by the Ultimate Life Form. Some people would pay for that, buddy. He couldn't stand the sight of himself and put on the mask. And boy oh boy, do we have a great opportunity here. Two nobodies influenced by the characters of Sonic. You're both just putting on costumes to stand out in front of the pack. You're the two big newcomers to the war. Your paths are intertwined, and you both want to be recognized by the legends of this universe. Except to get there, you went two different ways. Infinite could have been your Shadow. And let me say, they do go into this a little bit. You get some parallels pointed out, but it feels bogged down by 2 servings of Sonic. If they made him more your rival than Sonic's, I think they could have told a great story about being another animal in this world. But regardless, I still like the idea of Infinite, a disgraced mercenary who goes hard on the feather, and his background could be compelling if pushed just a little bit more. I really do hope they give him another shot. I love his ridiculous edgy persona, his endless soliloquies, and his angry little mask. He loses so much, and he just can't take it. You'll probably hear me screaming when we catch this guy changing a tire in the next racing game. He's such a dweeb, and I love him. But let's take a left turn and talk about music, something I almost never do. And you'll see why in the next 5 seconds, because I don't really know how to dissect it appropriately, but I can at least explain how it made me feel. and I felt heroic. That main theme is certainly a banger, and I enjoyed what I heard from the vocal tracks in a lot of those Avatar stages. Unfortunately, I just can't remember most level tracks from this game. I couldn't hum a melody if you ask. I felt the same way with Frontiers as well. Most of what I remember are the main themes and the boss anthems, so in fear of pissing anyone off, I'll stay in my lane and end things there. It fit the tone of the game, which is what it needed to do for me. I will say though, that the classic Sonic songs were my favorite tracks. Ghost Town in particular. Maybe picking Ghost Town out of the OST is like picking Rystar out of the Mega Collection? I don't know. It just boops and bops, man. I like it. Let's move on to something I do know. Levels. You know me, I'm a level guy. Do I like these? Well, no, not really. Common criticisms with the level structure are that they are too short, painfully straightforward, and lack any real progression. Besides the boss battles, you don't feel like you've accomplished much once they stamp the letter on you. There's also only 7 real settings here, and 30 levels are divided between those locales. You bounce between these zones throughout the game. Conceptually, it's a clever idea. In essence, you're having short skirmishes across the globe to retake land, a theme propped up by the shifting percentages on the world map. But the reuse of these assets can make levels feel recycled. I think these chunks would have been better served as different scenes from one larger battle, spread across the smaller levels. And we do see this with the final set of stages. Assaulting that giant sun machine is exciting because we're making progress through multiple fronts, as different characters on the battlefield. It feels like you're coordinating an assault, but unfortunately, this framing is only served for the ending. Most of the time, you're jumping between storylines and revisiting the same spaceports. As for the actual level layout, well, what can I say? Most of the meat is in the 2D sections, as going 3D typically has you running straight, and even in the second dimension, I wasn't getting much out of it. Something people have mentioned to me is how much the camera fails a lot of the set pieces and forces, and I couldn't agree more. The camera movements are stilted and sharp. There's no cohesion to them when applied to the rest of the level, but I'll get deeper on this when we touch on specific stages in the future. Lastly, I want to speak on the look of these levels because the graphical fidelity on them is actually quite remarkable. All the moving pieces in the background, wonderful sense of depth in 2D and 3D in some cases. There were a lot of shots that gave me a bit of that jaw-drop feeling. The sense of scale in the spaceport is outstanding. It just gets muted by the morose color palette. The detail is impressive, but it's not applied to anything that stands out. I felt like I ran through a lot of metal hallways, you know? Even in Green Hill, of all places. The standout locale from this game is definitely the city. No wonder they saved it for the reveal, put it on the cover, and gave another crack at it in Shadow Generations. Paired with the sleek white metropolis, these two environments held my attention. Like I said, the gameplay wasn't very offensive or difficult, and this applies equally to the levels. Easy to complete, but hard to remember. Alright, that's enough level talk. Let's finish up here with Sonic Forces. So, to conclude, what do I think of Sonic Forces? Was it as awful as everyone made it out to be? No. But therein lies the problem. So heads up, Wozniak jump scare. But during that Scott the Woz Sonic bracket, Samuel Procrastinates brought up the great argument of would you rather play a bad game or a boring game? I've thought about that a lot, and it's kind of reshaped the way I tackle and appreciate Sonic's history. The thing I respect most about the franchise now is that it has always taken risks, even to its own detriment. I find Sonic Team's experimentation so endearing, so charming. They don't like getting comfortable. There's so many different ways to make this guy go fast across 30 years of adventure. It's a fun exercise to just lean back and explore how all of them work. So I ask myself, why would I choose this one? By all means, it functions, it succeeds in its vision, but it doesn't call to me like 06 or even Boom. And ultimately, that's Forces' downfall here. It didn't push itself. It worked so hard to stay safe that it ended up feeling stale. But after I finished the final showdown, ran out the credits, and returned to that title screen, I was surprised to see it dressed up in white, with a single flower growing in the center. And then the piano hit me, and I felt something. I saw a slice of passion in that thin little flower. There is always a bit of heart in these games. Even if the themes of the story didn't impact me, I have no doubt they impacted somebody else. That's just what Sonic does when you put him into a video game. He gives you that hope. I believe we'll see more love for Forces over time, once people who played it as kids grow up and remember it fondly. I think it's still too soon. We haven't moved far enough away, but trust me, Forces will have its day. Every Sonic game does. Because no matter what, the heart of Sonic is still there. But beyond all that, I do want to end on some levels that I was drawn to. If I were ever to make a level analysis, it would be on stages like Capital City, a combined assault in a new location as a foot soldier with new gameplay, amusing radio chatter, heavy on the cinematics and spectacle, exciting concepts that warp the layout of the level, and it highlights the Avatar Infinite rivalry. This is everything I wanted from Forces. Kinda light on the gameplay, but you know me. Enemy territory and virtual reality. Squint and I can start to see Shadow Generations here. Null space, pure spectacle, mainly concerned with going fast. But boy do I wish they pushed that starting concept further. Null space is like a blank canvas. They could have done so much with it. Mortar Canyon. Squint and I can start to see a very loose Unleashed bonus act. If they were strict with a boost here, this could have had a lot of potential. And finally, a little place called Sunset Heights. A cinematic powerhouse that absolutely needs its own video. Dare I say, its own comparison. And that, my friends, is what you're gonna get. Stay tuned. But for now, don't let my deflating outlook on forces harsh the vibe. If you are a genuine fan of this game, please tell me why. No need for a defense, just tell me what you love about it. Infinite stands, sound off. Hell, even the haters. If you had to give one thing to this game, what would it be? Graphics, setting, episode shadow? And speaking of shadow, boy am I excited to tackle this next comparison. We will be tackling the entirety of the city zones and forces, as I believe they all peek their head into that shadow remix. Park Avenue, Ghost Town, Redgate Bridge, even episode shadow will make an appearance. So prepare for 4 extra forces analyses with your Sunset Heights. So if you haven't already, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting that bell. But in the meantime, let's chat forces. Thanks for watching, and I'll see ya in the city. Peace!